Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Michelle Chatman, and I'm an assistant professor here at the University of the District of Columbia. I teach in the criminal justice program. And as you know, I gave a Tedx talk in March of this year at Bergen Community College. And I'd like to thank Dr. Howe for inviting me to come and just share a little bit in terms of how I prepared for my TED Talk. So I hope you find this information useful. So before I talk about how I actually prepared, I'd like to tell you just a little story about how I got invited to do a TED Talk, because I absolutely love TED. I mean, it's my entertainment. I look at these talks on the weekends, and when I'm at home washing dishes, I'll just put on a talk because I love learning new things. So I'm a member of an organization that promotes contemplative pedagogy, which is the integration of meditation and other introspective events into the teaching and learning environment to help students learn better. I was at a summer session at Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts, and I was giving another workshop on something. And so this is a group of faculty and college administrators who all come together to talk about living a contemplative life and introducing practices in classrooms. So we have really formed community. It's like 100 of us. And this is, we're hugging and happy to see each other every morning. We have breakfast and lunch and dinner together. So it's really like a little college on a college campus. So at my presentation, before I started, I told everyone in a joking kind of way, I'm really just practicing for my TED Talk. And they were like, oh, okay, Michelle, great. And I was like, maybe they actually think I have a TED Talk. So at the end of the session, someone said, please tell us when your TED Talk is. And I was like, oh yeah, I messed up. They really do think I have a TED Talk scheduled, which I didn't. I was just kind of putting that out there. Well, wouldn't you know it, by the end of that day, Lori Tala from Bergen Community College came up to me and said, I produce TED Talks for my campus, and we are having a talk in March of 2016, and we have one slot left, and if you want it, it's yours. So I like to tell that story because, one, it reminds me of kind of the mystery and magic that can happen in life when we're open to it, but also because I think it incorporates some of the elements that I actually think can contribute to giving a good TED Talk, which is staying open and just really being in the moment. So how did I prepare? Well, as I said, I watch a lot of TED Talks. So I just kept watching as I was trying to figure out what I would talk about. This particular TEDx event was organized around a theme, and the theme was life-changing narratives. So that kind of helped me figure out, or at least gave me kind of inclination as to what I might talk about. So I thought about events that kind of changed my life or that were really impactful in terms of my lived experience. So I watched TED Talks, and I just have to say that some of my favorites are Chimamanda Adichie's The Danger of a Single Story, Brian Stevenson's We Have to Talk About It, Injustice, Larry Smith's Why You'll Never Have a Great Career, and Amy Cuddy's talk on body language. These are just incredible TED Talks. If you haven't watched them, please, please, please do. So I thought about what are the 2 or 3 events that have had the most transformative impact upon my life. And there are 2. One is when I traveled to the Gambia, West Africa in 1993, shortly after I had completed college here at UDC. And then another is when I initiated into a West African priesthood, which I did here in Washington, D.C. And so I typed up my abstract, or kind of a summary of both of them, and I sent them to Lori, my contact at Bergen. And she said, hands down, talk about the Gambia project. I said, okay, fine, cool, good. So then I began to write about this experience. And of course, I wrote too much at first. It was like 5 or 6 pages long. And we were told that you could only give a 15-minute talk. Please don't go over 15 minutes. So that kind of gave me some parameters. But some of the other thinking that went into what I would include and what I would not include, some of the things that I considered were, what kind of impact did I really want to have? What did I want to leave my audience with after this talk? Also, as a woman of African descent and as a Pan-Africanist, I was really concerned about how my talk about my experience in West Africa would either represent or misrepresent Africa. And that is something that I care very deeply about. I try to stay on top of images, narrative, information that I feel misrepresents Africa, because that has been done for centuries, and I did not want to contribute to that. And this concerned me because my second trip to the Gambia, there was a military coup, and I decided not to talk about that experience because I thought that it contributed, it's too big of an event to try to talk about in a few minutes. So I intentionally left that and a few other things out. But I did, of course, include some of the meaningful, and even that experience was meaningful, some of the more meaningful parts of that experience, such as being in a country where English was not the primary language, but where many people spoke English, and how it really forced me, or I should say gave me the opportunity to just kind of sit still sometimes and listen and hear the music in the way people were speaking, and to just be still and be present. So that was just a really deep and meaningful learning for me. So some of the other ways in which I prepared for my talk, I have some notes here, just give me 1 second. I thought about my own skills and preferences, and quite frankly, I thought about my strengths. And so it's not difficult for me to stand up in front of a group of people and talk and express myself. I love to sing. I sing with a band, and so I'm kind of pretty used to this. And so I thought, well, I'll just sing a little bit, because one, I hadn't seen many TED or TEDx talks that included singing, and I knew that would make me feel good. So I just sang a little bit. It's actually a poem that I just kind of created a melody for. And that's how I open my talk. So I would encourage you to kind of think of your strengths. If telling jokes is your strength, or I don't know, if being abstract is your strength, if dressing in all purple is your strength, I would say think of what makes you feel comfortable, what would help you kind of own that stage that you're going to be on for about 15 minutes, right? So some of the other things, I mapped my talk. So I thought about how I wanted to start. I thought about what was the message, what did I really want to leave my audience with. And you also have to know your audience. You have to have some idea of who is going to be sitting out there listening to you and taking in this information. So I really thought about who my audience was. They were primarily students at Bergen Community College. Many had, not traveled internationally, and I doubt that I don't know if any had ever been to the Gambia, West Africa. And we're used to hearing about Nigeria and Senegal and Ghana and larger countries, but the Gambia is kind of a pretty small country, and not a whole lot happens there. So I wanted to be sure that I contextualized and gave some history of the country, just a little bit. I didn't want to turn it into a lesson, but I wanted people to have some kind of reference. So I spoke about Alex Haley, the author of Roots, because in that seminal work, he traces his family's lineage back to the Gambia, West Africa. And so for people who were old enough to remember, that was kind of a reference point for them. So I thought about impact. I thought about the message. What did I really want to communicate? I thought about conflict or tension within the story and how I would convey that. And then, of course, with TED Talks, they want you to deliver a new idea, a different idea. And so contemplative pedagogy was my different idea. And so I connected my travels to the Gambia, West Africa, to my contemplative journey. Because truly it is one of the first places and one of the first periods in my life where I really began intentionally to pay attention to what was happening around me and within me, and paying attention to the people that I was with. It was my first time out of the country, and so you hear call to prayer, you see people washing clothes by hand, and all of these things that are just different culturally. And so that caused me to pay attention and to ask some questions of myself that I had not asked before. So some of the other things, and then I wanted to also be sure that I left or ended my talk with some kind of resolution, right? So to incorporate technology or not in terms of a PowerPoint, I had prepared a PowerPoint, and I practiced in front of some of my colleagues here at UDC, but the PowerPoint made it really bulky and it wasn't smooth, and I was like, I'm not going to do that. So you want to do what's comfortable, what feels good for you, and I knew that what felt good for me was just kind of being free, which meant I had to memorize my piece. So I did that. I practiced for several weeks. I probably honestly started too late with typing out my speech or my presentation, but I committed the time that I could to practicing, and I think it went well. There are some things I would have changed that I have changed though, and I'll mention those. So I didn't do a PowerPoint because I didn't want it to be a lecture, and it felt really bumpy and just not smooth, and it didn't feel good to me. So then there's this issue, of course, of just practicing and knowing your script, but also being open for other things to emerge. So that singing that I do at the end of the TED Talk was not in the script, but I couldn't remember my ending, and so I had to do something.
The show must go on.
The show must go on, so I sang at the end. I left out some key points that I really wanted to make. That I was a little disappointed about that, but that happens. That just happens. The interesting thing about when you're standing in front of a group, giving a presentation, delivering, in some ways it's helpful to have your script and to know what you're going to say, but in some ways I think it's really useful to leave just a little bit of space to just be open and to just let it flow and let it fall the way it will fall, right? And to just kind of be detached from the outcome. Otherwise, you'll be super stressed, and that won't be fun for anyone. Were I to do it again, and I hope I do have another opportunity to do one again, there's some things that I would like to have done. So this TED Talk, I gave it in Bergen Community College, which is about 4 hours away. And the organizers decided not to do a run-through before the actual filming of the TED Talk, which I was all prepared to do. But I would insist on that next time, either the morning of, much earlier, or something, just to become familiar with the stage, with the timing. There was a person who was timing for us, but I wasn't clear what was happening with that person. And they had cards in their hand that said like 5 minutes, and I said, well, am I supposed to see that? Is it 5 minutes from now, or do I have 5 minutes more? And I just couldn't, I didn't know what to do. So you had 15 minutes, but I only used 11 minutes and 11 seconds. And I could have used those additional almost 4 minutes because there was more that I wanted to say. But that was that. So as I said before, I left out some key points that I really wanted to include, which are that I've traveled to the Gambia 5 times. I lived there for a year. And the organization that sent me still works in the Gambia and in Tanzania. They're actually a local nonprofit self-help organization that's based right in Rockville, Maryland. And I didn't get to say that. So when you give a Tedx talk, of course you have to sign legal forms saying that you won't make any false scientific claims and you won't sell anything. But I was unclear if I said the name of the organization, would they take that as selling? So I just didn't say it at all. But these sorts of things are really important to clarify before you stand before your group and deliver your talk. And honestly, I would have allowed myself more time to craft my message and to practice my message, but I think it went okay. And I'm really grateful to have had the experience. So my goal was to get 1,000 people to watch this TED Talk. That's all I wanted. I just wanted 1,000 people to see it. And so I think something like 1,067 people have watched it. I know that there's some TEDx talks that have been uploaded to the main TED site, but you have to have like 1 million hits or something, or 1 million views, which is really not that important to me. This is really important to me. And after the talk was released, my husband connected our TV to the laptop so that he and my daughter and I could watch it. And the look on her face like, Mommy, that's you. Oh, drop the mic. I was like, yes. So that made it incredibly meaningful for me. So, thank you.